Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to the Oxytocin Effect. We have a very special guest today that many of you probably already know of. L&D nurse, author, mother, owner of chickens. Jen Hamilton is here. Everyone,
Hi
say
guys.
hello.
Hey, thank you for having me.
We are so excited to have you and talk about your book and your life and all of these things. So, yeah, let's get started. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of your journey to TikTok and starting to write a book and where all of those ideas came from?
Yeah, so everything that is going on in my life right now has happened by complete accident. There was no part of me that got on TikTok and was like, I'm gonna be a creator. My very first video was me trying to see what the plus button was on the bottom of the screen. I didn't know what that was, so I was like, oh, this is how you make a video.
Great.
I really got started during the pandemic, and I didn't start out my content being like labor and delivery forward. It was mainly like mom, kids being silly forward. Um, and I think that TikTok kind of figured out that I was a labor and delivery nurse based on, or at least involved in the birth world based on my algorithm. Like I would start to see birth stories and everything, and see people of varying qualifications talking about things. And so, but I really saw people telling their birth stories, and it really changed things for me because there were things that I had been conditioned to do as a labor and delivery nurse that I had no idea had an unintentional effect on people's experiences, good or bad. So I learned a whole lot about being a labor and delivery nurse from hearing people's stories. So I started doing more labor and delivery content, and yeah, things kind of took off from there. And then a couple years ago, someone had approached me about writing a book, and I was like, hey, I have something that I really want to talk about, which is how it's not so much what happens to you during labor, it's how it happens and how you feel and how it's all that other stuff. So yeah, and then I ended up writing Birth Vibes, which I really hope helps people. But I kind of wrote it for not just for patients, but for labor and delivery nurses, for doulas, for OBs, for people who live in this environment that we do. And so, yeah, it's a wild journey, and I can't believe that everything has happened because I never planned it.
Yeah. What was one of those things that surprised you about the experiences people had that you thought were kind of just normal, totally fine things?
Yeah, I think it was hearing people describe their births and describe things that were not um, uh, things that can actually happen in real life. Like the way that they had implanted the story in their head was them having to describe what happened to themselves based on their own understanding instead of having someone who is able to explain what happened in a compassionate and an empathetic way. So for instance, if you say, like, if I hear someone say, my baby's heart stopped during labor, but then they go on to explain that they continued in the labor process, pushed out a baby, and the baby did not have to be resuscitated. What I know that likely is a situation where they couldn't find the baby's heartbeat on the monitor. And so an empathetic and compassionate and communicative nurse could have said, hey, your baby's still in there. I'm just trying to find sorry, my cat. um, uh, hold on. Let me get this cat out of the way. If a compassionate or a communicative nurse kind of explained what was going on, it would not have implanted as traumatic of an experience. Because if you're truly thinking that your baby's heart has stopped during labor, that is hugely traumatic. So if you have someone that can explain things that are going on, to help you kind of narrate what's going on rather than having to fill in those blanks by yourself, I feel like that can kind of help with helping things not imprint so traumatically.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I often talk about my job as a doula being translation a
Yeah,
lot of the time, is just like literally repeating what medical professionals are saying in the setting in a different way or after the moment is over so that people actually understand what happens. Because I think so much of it comes from, and Caitlin and I have talked about this too, is like there's when it's your 9 to 5, you don't have as good of an understanding anymore of how much the general public doesn't know about birth.
for sure.
And then so much birth trauma just comes from people saying things offhand that don't feel crazy in the moment, but to the person who's giving birth, they feel really, really scary. So that definitely makes sense to me.
Yeah. I'm curious, you talk about like people not understanding what happened to them and how scary that can be and how that can turn maybe very normal situations into traumatic ones. Is it all communication? Is it all a misunderstanding? Or are there ever, experiences you've heard from people where or seen, in your own practice that were about power dynamics or about, actual problems with the way people are receiving their care?
Oh, for sure. Whenever I go and do talks, I say that birth trauma is not often caused by events, they're caused by people. So, whether that is someone dismissing a concern that you have, or someone who is making light of your pain, or not believing you, or um, kind of inserting themselves into a decision that you get to make yourself, instead saying like, well, this is what we're going to do. All of those things can contribute to feeling feelings of disappointment or guilt for like allowing, like, because I hear a lot of people from the on the back end of it saying like, I can't believe that I let them talk me into that, or that I let them do.
Mhm.
And so there's so much of like losing your power or losing your voice in that moment. So you can feel feelings of guilt, disappointment, trauma, from just people involved in your care who either do not have your best interest at heart or want to insert their own feelings, of what you should do onto you, or just not taking your concern seriously.
What do you think are some early like red flags that people can look for where they should say that they should trust their gut and not just go along with the flow because they don't want to be a difficult patient?
Yeah, well, I think that for the patient themselves, anything that's causing you to feel uneasy, I think, especially as women, we have developed this really big sense of gut, I guess. Like when we're out, coming out of a Walmart late at night, or like sensing danger, we have that ability to do. And so I think that listening to that, if you feel uneasy, not allowing that feeling to kind of just not letting it go, but listening to that. And then also, I think that when you're listening to your care team talk, does it make you feel more at ease, or does it make that feeling feel stronger? Um, are the people that are around you, are they telling you what you're going to do, like what we're going to do next, or are they involving you in that care and letting you be the driver of the decision making process? Because I think that the best kind of care is the kind that is not just collaborative, but also at the end of it, autonomous for the patient's care themselves. So I say collaborative in the way that, like, yes, we do birth all the time as labor and delivery nurses, doctors, doulas, OBs, midwives, everybody. Um, but at the same time, you have a patient who may hear the risks and benefits of something that we think is a good idea, but those risks and benefits don't either make sense to them, or the risks and benefits of not doing that make more sense to them. So I think that allowing is like a weird word because everyone is allowed to do, but I've not,
Mhm.
you know, not making patients feel like they don't have that ultimate voice. And then, also, um like supporting, which kind of feels hard sometimes, supporting whatever that decision is, even if I wouldn't make the same decision.
Yeah, definitely. And I think along with that, I think sometimes obviously a lot of the like onus is on the providers to be doing better, but because we know that, sometimes that's not just happening already, I think a lot of people hold fear that if they do speak up for themselves or if they do advocate for themselves or choose something different than what their providers say, that they will be then treated badly, or they will not be respected or not be listened to anymore or looked at as if they're stupid. What is something that you would say to someone who is wanting to speak up for themselves but is worried about the care that they will receive afterwards?
Yeah. I think that, healthcare, especially in America, is weird because people don't always have the opportunity to handpick their team. But I think that if you do have the ability to handpick your team, that is a huge part of how you're going to experience labor and birth. I know that we all understand that not everybody treats everybody the same. And so being with a care team that you trust is huge. And if you're not with a care team that you trust, or if it's like a new care team, like let's say that you had planned to deliver at one hospital, but you were visiting family somewhere else and you go into labor there, and so now you find yourself with a team that you've never met before. I think that getting to know you and you getting to know them as quickly as possible can help with that. And I think that a lot of that comes from communicating to your team what you need, communication wise, support wise, emotionally, physically, spiritually, all the things, so that they can kind of get who you are as a person. But in those moments where you feel like you're either not being heard or you need more advocacy, I really think it's imperative that the people that you bring with you are the right people to come with you. And sometimes it doesn't, it's not always the person that makes the most logical sense in relationship standpoint, because I've had plenty of people who bring, their baby's dad with them, but their baby's dad sucks ass. So like they don't speak up for them, or they push their own feelings onto that person. But I tell people, however your partner treats you when you're sick is how they will treat you in labor. So if you think that Dwayne is all of a sudden gonna find a compassionate bone whenever you're hurting, that's not the time that it happens. But if you know that Dwayne, the last several times that you've had, the flu or strep throat, is asking you like, okay, when is dinner gonna be done? Come on, bro. So
Yeah.
even if it makes not very good logical sense, I want to empower people to pick someone who is going to truly be there to be an advocate for them, not to push on their own ideas of what they think they should do, someone who's not afraid to speak up for you, and someone who's able to read your cues of how you're feeling and be able to interpret those in a way that allows them to speak up for you if you need to. Because I think that there's this fear or this onus that like, if I can't speak up for myself, nothing's going to get done. But if you have people in your corner, your partner, your doula, your aunt, your cousin, whoever that is imperative to being able to get to the end of this knowing that you were heard.
I do think that a lot of doulas or people in the birth space kind of there's like two schools of thought, right? Like either you believe that you can have whatever you want because you're the patient, and at the end of the day, your, desires trump all, which is true. But then there's also this other part of it that you kind of maybe touched on a little bit in that response of like, that's not really realistic or how it shows up in the world because there's a lot of anxiety and there's power dynamics and there's other things to consider. And so a lot of it, I think, comes down to how we as nurses and providers and people who are in those positions of power interact with people, in our communication and the way that we're treating our patients. So I'm curious, with your book coming out, and I'm, thinking I haven't read it yet because it's not been released, but I want to know, if you could sit down with every OB, midwife, nurse out there and have them read one chapter of your book, um, what would you hope changes about their behavior or how they talk to patients after reading it?
So there is a chapter in particular that I think a lot of people in the birth space will resonate with, and it's about a patient who makes decisions that maybe the team doesn't agree with, and what that looks like in real life, and that there still is the opportunity to have kindness, compassion, empathy, a curiosity to understand why people make decisions. And even if it doesn't make sense to us, still supporting that patient in the way that they need so that they still feel held and able to make their own autonomous decisions. I think there needs to be this divorce almost from like our expectations of what our patients should do, um, so that we're not. I know that we have to take everything personally, but I think that there's so many people who take patient choice personally that they don't trust us implicitly, which they do not have to do. Or that like we have somehow failed if a patient does not agree to do whatever we think is right. And there is like every decision that happens in labor needs to be a personal decision. Okay, we can't just blanket say, okay, everybody has to have an IV, everybody has to be on continuous monitoring, everybody has to have IV fluids in labor. Like nothing in labor and delivery needs to be blanket. So there is this spectrum of things that are evidence based, right, and then things that can take some personal, looking at what that person has going on individually, so that people can make the right decisions for them. And like not every person who doesn't accept an IV in labor is gonna hemorrhage and have this terrible outcome, or not every
Yeah.
person who declines antibiotics is gonna have this terrible outcome. It's just there's personal choice, and if our patients decide not to do what we decide they should do, that is still their choice. And at the end of the day, I mean, I understand that it's hard, and as long as I have given my patient all the information that they need to make a decision, then it is their empowered choice, whatever they decide. So I really hope that if people read it, they understand that part of it, that like your job ends as far as like the decision making part. Your job ends once that information is given, and then you have to give them space to make that decision, and then just let it happen as much as possible until something changes. So if a patient makes a decision that is against medical advice, I tell them, you have all the information that you need to make a decision. You let me know if you change your mind, and I will let you know if circumstances have changed. Because I think there's a lot of like coercion that happens where stuff keeps coming up over and over and over again when the situation has not changed in order to require more thinking about that decision.
Yeah, and I think it's this dynamic too of like people who work in hospitals all the time, often because you don't see these things very much where people have maybe refused like something like an IV, right, which is this like very standard thing. And then if you almost never see someone without an IV in labor, it's very easy to get into your head that this is going to be the worst hemorrhage I've ever seen. We're not going to be able to get a line in. It's going to be this huge, giant emergency, instead of thinking about the actual reality and statistics of what's
Right.
going on and how dangerous something really is. I think a lot of it for healthcare professionals and even me as a doula, like I'm not absolved of thinking that I sometimes know what I would do in a situation, right? But you get into this mindset where you're actually thinking so much more about your own comfort and how safe you feel in a situation instead of actually thinking about how safe and how comfortable the patient is.
Very true.
Do you think that there's ever a line? Do you think that there's ever a point where it goes so far where, patients wanting to do something that you might deem so risky or dangerous that those feelings change at all? I know you had mentioned or you had talked about people feeling healthcare providers feeling like it's a personal failure. Did I provide enough information, enough informed consent? And I can understand that because if a patient wants to do something that I would think is extremely dangerous or just go completely against medical advice, that could feel like maybe I didn't provide enough information. But is there a point when your behavior or the way that you're speaking to patients changes? And is it hard to balance that between becoming maybe a little bit more pushy or what some people might call manipulative to get a patient to do what you think is safe when things get a little bit scarier or riskier, like for example a patient that declines an induction at 44 weeks or something like that.
It's tricky because I believe in autonomy to the nth degree. So it's hard for me to say, like, I think that there's a line in which I could, like, step in and do something to someone without their consent, um, because I believe that it's going to be a bad outcome. Um, there will be people that disagree with me, that, there is a line that you have to jump in and do. I think that, when I first meet someone and I'm taking care of them, my hope is that I give them enough of me to understand that, like, if something is really going down and I look you in the eyeballs and I say, hey, girl, this is happening, that they trust and believe that. I've never been in a situation where there was a true emergency and a patient said, absolutely not. There may have been some hesitation, some like, I don't know what I want to do, but I've never been in a situation where someone said, absolutely not on like life-saving measures. The only part like ethically where nurses and doctors are allowed to step in and do something to someone is if that person is no longer like conscious slash able to make their decisions. And that at that point, it like falls to the next of kin unless they're not there. But it's hard for me to say that there is a line, because I've seen and been involved in, seeing bad outcomes from someone not wanting something, but I still am going to support their decision to do whatever they feel is right for themselves in that moment.
Yeah. Which I think is a really hard thing for people to navigate working in healthcare.
I think that's where a lot of the coercion comes from, is people feeling like they have to intervene or make someone do something to avoid this catastrophic thing, which I understand both sides of it. So I think that coercion, at its beginning moments, comes from a place of like, I want to protect you from this XYZ thing that I've seen, but it still doesn't make it right.
Yeah. And I think you're so right on the money talking about how it's so much more about preventing that moment than it is about coercing someone into doing what you want them to do. And I see that dynamic play out all the time in hospitals where I can tell that a provider is nervous about something. And instead of building trust so that if something comes up, the patient knows that they can look to them for help, they create mistrust because of their own fear. And then that's such a hard dynamic to be in for everyone involved in the situation, because, of course, we understand why providers and nurses do that, but also it's so much easier to have those conversations when things do get harder, when we do get into a sticky situation, if someone has already respected what you want. I had a client one time who was a transfer from a home birth. And I think just a really good anecdote of a nurse doing exactly what you're talking about that was really good is that the first thing that she said to us when she came into the room was, I'm so sorry that you're here. I love home births. I think it's so cool that you were doing that. And I'm so sorry that you had to be here. And let me know if there's anything I can do to make this more similar. But let's get you as close to that vibe as we can. And even if that birth had, gone completely off the rails of what she wanted, which it didn't end up doing, but even if it had, my client would have then trusted that that nurse has her best interest in mind, instead of if you come in with judgment, then when something does need to happen, then these people already don't trust that you have their best interest in mind.
Absolutely.
Do you think there's anything that is a common thing that makes nurses or OBs, midwives roll their eyes that really shouldn't?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I'm just gonna go general on this. I think a really long, detailed birth plan, especially if someone has never had a baby before, at least in my own personal experience, is the thing that most often would get some sort of an eye roll. And I think that really, really strict, long, detailed birth plans can come from one of two things. The first is this um, feeling of fear, of loss of control, of feeling like they're going to do something to me unless I write down specifically not to. The other is this feeling of power where they have researched everything that they want to do. They feel very confident and comfortable in their decisions, and so they want to communicate that. But I think that seeing a really long detailed birth plan, not as someone who's just like trying to, you know, tell us what we're going to do. I feel like there's this feeling of that. Instead of that, seeing that person as a human being and trying to be curious about where that birth plan comes from. Is it from this place of fear? Is there anything that I can do as someone who's caring for you to help you feel more at ease while you're here? Is there anything that I can make sure that I do to hold your values close so that you can leave here feeling empowered in the decisions that you made? And I think also from if we're looking at that person, if they've made this birth plan from a place of feeling empowered, that that as a human being that they have done so much homework and this is so important to them. So I think that both of those situations require us to be sensitive and compassionate and empathetic and looking at that person as a human being and understanding that long and detailed birth plans don't usually come from a place of just like saying, well, they're telling us what we're going to do or not do. I think that it comes from one of those places. And if we can see people as human beings and as someone who is wanting a really great experience, then it causes us to, not be so judgy about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, your book is called Birth Vibes, and you've talked a lot about like kind of planning for the vibe of your birth as opposed to exactly what will go down in the moment. Is there anything that you wish people would put on birth plans that they don't often put on birth plans that when you see it you're like, "Ooh, I love that."
Yes. I love when someone tells me something about them that makes today difficult or could come up in a
Mm.
way that would like knowing that would help me take care of them. It's kind of like a secret cheat code of being a nurse giving you great care is knowing your background just enough to know the things that either make you scared, sensitive, nervous, worried, or any of those things, because I can go behind the scenes and make sure that those things either don't come up or that if they do, I'm protecting you in those moments. So, for instance, I mean, it could be like a weird thing. I had a girl one time who I asked her that question, like, is there anything that you've been through that makes today hard? And she was someone who had she had diabetes. And in her being diagnosed as a child, she was often held down and they brought out the cotton balls like that she knew that she was about to get her finger stuck. And so one thing that she mentioned that could help her feel safer today is if I made sure that no one brought any cotton balls in. And I was like, of course I can. Like that's an easy peasy thing to do. But had I not known that, that's what we normally use whenever we're, checking somebody's blood sugar. But it can go all the way to, hey, my mom was supposed to be here, but she's actually on another unit getting chemo. Like I've had that happen before. Or my husband was supposed to be here and he's deployed. Or, I've been sexually abused. Like knowing these background things. I know that sometimes it can be really hard to let someone brand new into an important part of your story. But being able to know those things helps me take such better care of you if I'm able to protect you from whatever thing that is.
Okay, the next I want to talk about, because I've never heard you talk about it on your TikTok. I'm sure you probably have, but I haven't seen it. Is about your own birth experience, Jen. You have your own children. It's
Yeah.
been a few years since you've had your babies, but can you tell us maybe what those experiences were like, just
Yeah.
overall? And were you in any place that you are now as far as like understanding what was happening around you and you?
No. So I was an ER nurse for both of them. My 13-year-old, I was a baby ER nurse. And the very first chapter of the book is my own personal experience with labor the first time. And background that I'll just tell for you guys. I was an elective induction, but it was a little early elective. My doctor was wanting to go to an Ava Brothers concert, so I was like, hell yeah, I will definitely be induced for that. This was a long time ago. He's since retired, so I feel so safe saying that. But yeah, so I had no clue what was happening to me. I got Cervidil. I didn't know what that was. Um, Everything went great. Everything went fine. I mean, besides figuring out that, labor sucks. It did not feel good. I went into it for my first one thinking that I was going to try to do it without an epidural, because honestly, the epidural kind of freaked me out, like thinking about a needle going in my back. And my mom didn't have an epidural with me. So I was like, I'm related to her. That should be enough, you know? Bang. No.
Don't need to prep if it's in my blood.
Yeah, it's fine. It's part of who I am, you know? And yeah, that didn't work. So I got to like 3 centimeters and was very sad. So I got an epidural. But I remember like taking a nap. I was watching, remember when Fixer Upper was like a big, the Joanna Gaines and them? That was on the TV. I was watching that for a while. And then all of a sudden I was like, something's happening, you know? So and then something was happening. But I did have to push for a while. I pushed for like an hour and a half with my first one. Now, my understanding of what was supposed to happen in the pushing came from like watching Knocked Up, you know? So I thought you just scream a couple times and the baby comes out. It's not how it works in real life most of the time. So whenever I was giving it my all, I was pushing with every single thing that I had, and he wasn't coming out. I was like, what the hell is this? I was not a fan. And so I got to the point where I was losing my ever-loving mind. And my doctor was like, do you want me to help you? Like, are you good? And I was like, no, I'm going to do it by myself. And I pushed one more time and I was like, get him out of me. So yeah, my first baby was born via vacuum. He just needed like a little nudge under the pubic bone, and then he was home free. And then with my second one, I got, back then they called it gestational hypertension. By today's standards, preeclamptic, big time.
Yeah.
I was so sick with preeclampsia. I had the day that I delivered him, I woke up because I could feel my heartbeat in my fingers and in my lips. Like that's what woke me up. And I took my blood pressure and it was 180/110. And I called my doctor's office. Yeah, and they didn't get back to me right away, but I had an appointment that day. So I went in and it was like 160s over something. I don't remember. And they're like, yeah, you're going to have a baby today. So I just went but I kind of figured, I was an ER nurse then also, and I was so swollen starting at like 35 weeks pregnant that I got up one morning and my husband would help me put on my socks and shoes because A, I couldn't reach, B, I couldn't get, like, my feet were so fat, I couldn't get stuff on. So there was one morning he got up with me and he's like, I'm so sorry, I can't put these on. He like flopped the tongue out of my shoe and everything. I couldn't even get my toes in there. So I went to work completely barefoot, walked through the parking lot of the emergency room completely barefoot, and then went inside and put on like those little paper OR booties because I couldn't put my, but I wasn't about to call out because I couldn't put my shoes on. So, but I didn't realize that that was bad. Like, I just thought that's kind of what happens to pregnant people. Like, you just get real big. But yeah, I ended up being on blood pressure medicine after that, that I finally got taken off of after a few weeks. But my second one was great. He literally just broke my water, started pit, and then a few hours later he was born. So I had really great experiences with both of mine, even though I was sick.
Like you didn't know what you know now, and so you kind of get to take that and all of like the fear and the uncertainty and the weird, all the things that our patients go through. You kind of got that experience before you had to start advocating for them.
Yeah, in the book I say that before I was a labor and delivery nurse, I was someone in labor. So I want to talk to you from that experience because I get it. Like, I know what it feels like.
Yeah. You talked earlier a bit about like your partner is going to be the same person when they're in labor. They're not going to magically become this like amazing supportive human if they're not already. Do you have any moments in your own labors that you remember of your husband supporting you or of the nurse that you had or anything like that?
Yeah, the nurse that I had my very first time was actually somebody that I was in like hospital orientation with. So she also was a new grad. And so I walked in and she was my nurse. I just felt like instantly at ease with her there. My parents and family were there, but they kind of like came in and out. My husband was there the whole time. I did force him to not eat the whole time that I was in labor my very first time. And then by the end of it, he felt a little faint. And so he did order a pizza while I was pushing, which I will never let him forget.
As you should.
Yeah.
And then your postpartum experiences with your babies, what was that like for you after, not knowing much about it? I mean, even as an L&D nurse, some people don't know very much about postpartum, but really going into it super fresh, what was that like for
That's a
you?
wild freaking ride postpartum. Um, the boobs, oh man. I remember with my first, like, I didn't know there were a bunch of holes in your nipple. Didn't know that. Didn't know that they would get so hard or so big. It was wild. And then with my second one, I lost so much water weight within the first week. I thought I was Beyonce. I felt so good just because I didn't have those feelings of like not being able to move around anymore. I could put shoes on. Yeah. I felt so sexy, which I know is not anything that anyone ever thinks ever. I know that that is a weird thing to say, but I think I felt so bad for so long that I felt unburdened at that moment. So, I I did not struggle with postpartum depression or anxiety. My sister did, so I watched her through that. But I was very fortunate and blessed in my postpartum experiences to not have any, real terrible times.
Very good. So, switching gears, one thing, this is a little bit selfish. I want to talk to you about this because I've been really inspired by really just how outspoken you've been online about, I mean, I feel like I followed you for years, right? And you really stepped into this advocacy role, like, and it's just very commendable. And I'm curious to know, with the way people have responded to some of the more outspoken things that you've said, at what point did you feel like risking your nursing license or, putting yourself sort of in the line of fire was worth being the advocate?
That's a great question. Some days I don't know. um, I think that, like, if you read the American Nurses Association's Code of Ethics, um, I think that's what kind of really emboldened me to think about it differently. That there may be some who don't want to talk about those things, and that's fine. But I felt a calling as a nurse to talk about those things because if I'm to follow the code of ethics, it requires me to be an advocate for the communities that we care for. It requires me to be an advocate for um, even the people that can't pay, that like I believe that healthcare is a human right. And yeah, it was very scary to have people, come to the board of nursing about me and try to get my nursing license taken away from me, not taken care of. And that was a scary time, but I would never take it back. Like I stand by everything that I've said, and I know that if you're going to be clear on anything, you're going to have people that do not like you. And that I have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
And that can be a scary time, especially when the public has so much power over whether or not, you have a livelihood, with being able to be reported so easily. And I haven't shared this publicly, but I'll tell you now. So, less than a year ago, I was having my nursing license looked at, like by the board of nursing. I didn't
Mhm.
actually go under investigation, but they did contact me and say, like, hey, we just need to let you know that several people have reported you. And then I just got a letter from the American Nurses Association saying that I had won the President's Award for 2026 because of that. So I
Wow.
Wow.
I'm grateful that I didn't stay silent, I guess.
That's awesome. And that's kind of where I'm at. I'm a viewer, right? Like I'm watching it and it gives so much more credibility to everything else you talk about too, because maternal health in its essence is political, right? So it's hard to, not get into that in some way, shape, or form. But I also understand why big creators, don't do
Mhm.
that because they're putting their career on the line.
Yeah.
They're putting potentially their family in danger. So it really says a lot about you and your character. I
Mhm.
think that you did that. So I think that they gave that. You said it was an award, right? I think they gave
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And has that been something that, I mean, we see a lot of larger creators kind of leave their day jobs as they gain popularity and, go on to have these other opportunities. But you've kept nursing.
Yeah.
Is that something that like you've kind of that has been like an ongoing decision for you, or is that something that feels very sure to you that like because that's where so much of this advocacy and your passion for all of these things comes from, that that's something that you want to continue to do?
Yeah. So it's been a non-negotiable for me, even
Yeah.
through all the things that have happened. Even on my book tour, one of the non-negotiables that I told them is like, I have to be back for the weekend. Like I'm gonna be at work.
Mm,
So just we got to work around that. Um, it's been very important to me because without it, none of this other stuff makes sense to me. So it's like the foundation of who I am, not just on the internet, but in real life. And I don't know who I am without that. So I have no
mm,
plans of stopping working or even changing my schedule to be less. So if you see me not working at the bedside anymore, it's because I was forced to not be at the bedside. I'll say that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. One of
I'm curious to
the,
know,
sorry, go ahead.
as a nurse, how do you ensure that, your political beliefs and all of that don't impact your patient care? Or do you let it impact your patient care in positive ways?
I think that it impacts my care in positive ways because I will take care of you no matter what. I have strong beliefs that healthcare is a human right. I believe that every single human deserves kindness, compassion, empathy, communication, and I will treat you as if you were my sister, no matter what your beliefs are, because that is what I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it's so clear in watching your content. And also, I'm sure you're reading your book and all of these things that where all of the things that you have said and done, even the ones that are very controversial, like, reading a passage from the Bible,
But
all of
very
these things that like cause so
Yes, so
much,
controversial.
yeah, cause so much online. I think like the reason that it's so impossible to, argue against that is that all of your positions come so authentically and deeply just from compassion and from loving other human
Love, yeah.
beings. And I think it's quite revealing when that offends people and when it gets people upset. Did you expect that amount of backlash for the like simple things that you've said and done?
Girl, no. Whenever I made that, I put my phone down, went to bed. got up the next morning, and then I had people texting me like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay? Are you okay?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And they're like, "So many people are making mean videos about you reading the Bible." It's like, "What?" And then I watched them and I was like, "Okay. I if I'm gonna be canceled, I would hope to be canceled by people who don't agree with compassion. Like if that's the stance that you have, please
Mm.
cancel me. I'm okay with that. So I it didn't make me feel, you know, regretful that I it just made me more solid in my stance. So
That's what's so incredible about it, I think, because I think what maybe people don't always realize too is like as you get to be a bigger size of creator, you can't be as polarizing. You can't really express strong opinions about things without, losing followers or, kind of limiting your growth. And that's why you see a lot of the biggest TikTokers to ever exist. They don't say a word, right? I'm trying to think of who that TikToker literally doesn't say a word at all. Or like, they just don't express any strong beliefs. So the fact that you have 4+ million followers on TikTok and have stood for what you believe in, is really commendable. And like, because a lot of people could go the other direction and say, well, I'll spare myself the grief because as you
yeah,
said, all you had to do was read a passage out of the Bible about love
yeah,
and you got hate and you got people trying to take, your nursing license away and everything. Could you imagine if you actually said something crazy?
I know, wild, so wild. Yeah, I have family members who are like, you could have so many more followers if you just didn't. I'm like, that's not what's important to me though. Like,
Mhm.
I really don't care. Like, sure, if I didn't say anything, yeah, I might have more followers, but for what? Like, I consider my platform to be a responsibility, and if I'm not using my platform in a way that I think is going to better not just patients who I'm caring for on labor and delivery, but also for the greater good of the communities that we serve as a whole, what's the point,
Yeah.
you know?
And
Mhm.
that is why those 4 million follow you because it's real, it's
Well, thank
authentic.
appreciate
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I think I like, as, a staunch member of Gen Z and, this younger generation that's very like outspoken. I think so many people right now are like looking for people who are outspoken. And there are people who are also losing a lot of the, not just followers, but like genuine fans of theirs. For example, Taylor Swift is a really big one of people who now I think a lot of us are looking at and going, it's not about like, how do you navigate this with a big platform? It's about how could you not navigate that
Yeah.
with your big platform? And
Mhm.
like, how dare you be willing to keep the money and the income and the opportunities that you have without speaking out about these things and without making it clear what your stance is so that the people who do love you, who are being affected by these things, know where you stand.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Do you think, Jen, do you think that if you were to lose your job, for example, you lose, everything professionally in that sense, do you think that it would be worth it?
Yeah. I I think that with as much as I've been able to like raise money, I mean, raising hundreds of thousands of dollars for, people who really need it and stuff. I mean, I wouldn't regret what I've done. I'll say that.
And I think that's a great place to be. I feel like when you position yourself from a place of love and compassion in everything you do and say, like what can people really do about that? You know what I mean? How can they can't weaponize that against you because you're in a grounded place.
Lovely. I have a question out of just personal curiosity, kind of.
Yeah.
I'm someone who was not raised religious at all.
Yeah.
That's never been a part of my life. And the hypocrisy that is present in some, more right-wing spaces, with the hypocrisy of listening to the teachings of Jesus and then not following what was actually said, I think is something that is clear to some people for a long time, and some people kind of have to grow into that understanding. And with that video that, so many people got upset about of you just reading quotes from the Bible, is that kind of controversy or hypocrisy something that you've been aware of for a long time, or is that something that you've kind of grown into understanding?
I think a little of both. So I grew up in very Southern evangelical
Hmm.
places. I went to a very conservative Christian college, Liberty University. And I think that's where my awakening began because I kind of began seeing some of the like, hey, well, that doesn't make any sense, Seeing them support things that I felt like Jesus might not have, or vice versa, um, kind of caused me to kind of think about things. But honestly, it's been just my experience as a nurse that has changed my political beliefs around what I was taught through the teachings of Jesus as a child, kind of as my like landscape, my framework, um, where I kind of saw those things more glaringly. And then, to see people that I always thought to be like kind, compassionate human beings celebrating, the dehumanization of immigrants. And like that doesn't make any sense to me. So I think that it's kind of like been a slow burn to where I am today. But it's because of the experiences that I've had that caused me to kind of see things differently.
Yeah. So on the topic of controversy, what is your hottest take as a labor and delivery nurse? What's
Oh,
the most controversial take that you have?
oh. All right, hold on. I gotta think about this. Hottest take. When I was writing this book, I even have like a page in there that says like there are going to be people who are angry with me in the birth world hospital space because of my hot takes on autonomy, because so much of OB is like, we're gonna do XYZ. Like, it's just, we know best and we're going to do that to you, you know? So I
Hmm.
think that my hottest take, I don't feel like it's hot, but just that people should be able to make their own informed, empowered decisions and not feel like they're, bad people if they choose differently. Or, I've had people come at me in the comment section whenever I say things like that, that we should be approaching people with, kindness, even if they go against what we say. Because, in the comment section, be like, oh, people are stupid and you can't trust people to blah, blah, blah. It's not your body and it's not your baby. And so I think that
Mhm.
my hottest take is that people need to let go of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Thank you so much, Jen, for being here. Thank you for having such an awesome, open, candid conversation about all of these sometimes kind of difficult topics. We're very glad to be able to chat with you today. Will you plug where people can find your book and your social media and all of that?
Yeah, so if they look up Jen Hamilton on any of the platforms, they'll be able to find me. And then if you look up Birth Vibes, anywhere you get your books, Amazon, your local book dealer, uh, you know, Barnes Noble, wherever, you can just find it there.
You'll be able to find it at Leela too.
Yay!
That's so
That'd be
cute.
awesome.
Yeah, lovely. Well, thank you so much for being here. We're excited to have you come back on next week for listening to the next episode of The Oxytocin Effect. Thank you guys. Bye bye.
And I wish that we had gotten this part, but I wanted to talk about the fact that you're literally a better seller, or more popular than what to expect when you're
For a moment,
expecting.
yeah, that happened.
I
could
cannot
not
believe that.
Yeah. It
I mean, I
changes
can believe
every
it, but if that were me, I would be losing.
It changes every day, but girl, I screenshotted that.
Well, we're gonna be talking a lot about your book, and try to get it back up there and keep it there.
Yeah.
Like, I can't wait for you guys to read it.
I'm so
Absolutely.
excited. I'm so excited.